after that point may strike the continuous workday concept. Okay. Incorrectly computing overtime pay, just not calculating the regular rate properly. The regular rate is all remuneration in a given work week divided by the number of hours worked. And then you're owed half-time, the employee is owed half-time for the hours worked over 40, yes. They sign in after they get the tools. And they show up at the job site. Because, I mean, there's a lot of variables in it. I'm just trying to flesh out your example. I'm sorry. Right. That type of commute is typically in the typical commuting issue. So it is not compensable if all you're doing is walking from your car to the facility. That's when, probably that's still okay, but that's when it starts to look, it depends on how far away it is. Although there is a case that has to do with farm workers in Texas where people commuting, they showed up at at a single location and then got on an old school bus for like 2.5 hours, and none of that time was compensable because it was all ordinary commuting time and it was for their convenience. There are cases with, I guess, the TSA folks who have to go through security in order to get to their posts. That's been found to be not compensable. It's just getting to your job site. Sometimes it's more difficult to get to your job site, and until there's been a first principal activity, which in that case I think would be getting the walkie-talkie and signing in, that would be the first principal activity. So up until that point, all of that travel time is non-compensable. So calculating the regular rate of pay, which a lot of times there's a failure to include a bonus in the regular rate of pay. Everybody knows if there's a non-discretionary bonus, that needs to be included in hourly employees' rates of pay for the purposes of computing overtime. If it's a purely discretionary bonus, it doesn't need to be included, but bonus amounts are included. Other typical violations are deductions for uniforms, guns, whistles, belts, other industry-required tools, and the cost of dry cleaning if it brings them below minimum wage. And there's an entire body of case law on what it means to have a uniform and what it means to, how many uniforms are sufficient and that sort of thing. Yes? Yes? If it is a non-exempt employee and they receive a bonus at the end of the year, and it is discretionary, and the employer just says everybody's going to get $500 or whatever, that's not included. If there are triggers, if we meet this budget, if we do X, if there is something where the timing or the amount of the bonus is somehow contractually obligated, even if it's not a true contract, that does get included. And the way that you do it, there are a couple of ways to do it. One is to make it a percentage of total compensation. If you pay a bonus that is a percentage of total compensation, including overtime hours, no matter how small that percentage, it always reflects the regular rate of pay. So it's an acceptable bonus to say you're going to get 0.1% of your total compensation for the year as a bonus. And so long as it includes the time that was paid at the overtime rate, that's always going to accurately reflect the regular rate of pay. If it's just a flat amount, then that flat amount has to be divided by 52, and each amount has to be attributed to a work week. And so any time that the employee worked overtime in a work week, they're going to have to get a little kicker on the bonus to reflect the overtime premium for that particular work week. If it's based on performance, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Then it does have to be included. What do you mean it's a variable? Well, if it's a monthly bonus, then you go back and attribute it to the particular month. To the extent that a bonus, it's a quarterly bonus, it's a monthly bonus, that amount gets attributed to whatever you can attribute it to. So if it's a quarterly bonus, you put it over the quarter. If it's a monthly bonus, you put it over the month. If it's an annual bonus, you put it over the year. You have to do a reconciliation, which is why it's much easier to do the percentage bonus, because there is no reconciliation. You just set your variables up to say, if you do X, Y, Z, you're going to get a bonus of 0.1, 0.2, whatever it is of your total compensation. And that's the important part, is it has to be total compensation, including the overtime hours worked. And if you do a percentage of total compensation, it will always reflect the regular rate of pay. Yes?
Two-part question. On the equipment,
Yes.
I know plenty of companies take a deposit from employees if they give them equipment. Does that play in pretty much the minimum wage? And if they are able to do that, and then the employee does not return the equipment, and you take that out of their check and they go below minimum wage, what kind of problem is that?
There is case law that says if you take a deduction from the employee's pay for a debt owed to the employer, and that amount reduces them below minimum wage, that is a violation.
But if they're entitled to get those monies back upon their termination, is it a deduction?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if you held that money, if the person didn't return the equipment and you held that money out and it reduced them below minimum wage, if you held that deposit, that could trigger a violation. If it's a debt to a third party, I mean, there's this entire case where somebody took a company car, crashed it into another car. The company fronted the money for the damage to the other car and also paid to fix the company car. To the extent that the funds were attributed to the fixing of the company car, that was a debt to the employer, and that was an impermissible deduction. To the extent that it was to the third party and it was the employee's responsibility, that is treated the same way as you make your health insurance, the employee makes the health insurance premium payments. It's a payment to a third party that doesn't implicate the employer. So if the deposit was not returned, that would trigger a minimum wage violation. The act of taking the deposit at the beginning, I'm not entirely sure what that would do, but the department, I think, would look very skeptically at that, because the point of it is to make sure that the employer has money at the end if the employee takes off with the tools. And the justification is, they might take your tools, but there are ways to get them back. You might not especially like the fact that you have to litigate against them to sue them to get that money. But the Fair Labor Standards Act is an overly remedial statute that was enacted during the Great Depression, is designed to make work. It's hypersensitive to employee rights, and that sort of thing, it would be frowned upon by the department. I don't know how successful anyone would be in private litigation on that issue.
And is it only if they were to go below minimum wage? In other words, if they were making $1,000 in a week and you took $100 out?
That's not a problem. Right, it's only if it triggers the minimum wage provisions. Correct.
But they're still employed.
Right, you can do it all as long as it doesn't bring them below minimum wage. And these issues, when they come up in the restaurant industry in particular, are very difficult, because restaurant employees almost always just make $2.13 an hour, and then the rest is made up with the tip credit.